But the Sumerians didn't have telescopes and therefore could only have known about those planets if aliens told them about their existence. But if aliens told them about those planets, why not about the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, or Saturn's rings? The seal doesn't show any of these features, and the Sumerians thought that the moon and the sun were planets, which they aren't. Certainly aliens would know that the sun and moon are not planets. Sitchin is picking and choosing things in the picture to support his arguments, and ignoring things that don't support it, like the inscription on the seal itself, which has nothing to do with his theory. This isn't science, it's fantasy. It's also wrong. If Sitchin does know about an incoming planet, he didn't get it from his translations. Another argument against Planet X is the absence of any evidence for it. For Planet X to be here in less than a decade, it can't be farther than 1 billion or so kilometers away. Even at that distance, it would be one of the brightest objects in the sky. Remember, tiny Pluto is 5 billion kilometers out and can easily be detected using modern equipment. And Pluto is way smaller than Planet X is supposed to be. Some claim it's because it's hiding behind the sun, and that's why we don't detect it. If it was behind the sun, it would be moving at its fastest point, considering its projected orbit, and it would only be behind the sun for a very short time. There are a lot of claims about Planet X out there, like the observatories being closed down to keep the information from the public, which is not true at all, besides the fact that they would need to confiscate every telescope in the world to keep this secret hidden. There's also been postings of pictures and other so-called evidence of Planet X, all of which have been shown to either be an admitted hoax or a mistake of some kind. So let's take a look at what supposedly got this whole thing started, the Mayan calendar. The first question is, did the Mayan long count calendar predict the end of the world? No. There is no reference to this concept in Mayan culture. These ideas about the Mayan calendar are imposed by us, and not by the Mayans. Again, quoting John Major Jenkins, he says, "I do not concur with the Neo-Atlantean pole shift cataclysmologists on the idea that the world will literally end in 2012. With this distinction in mind, I admit that I still occasionally write as a shorthand note, end date, or end date in 2012. This does not mean that I believe the Mayan calendar or the world will end in AD 2012. Often when you listen or read or watch a presentation on 2012, they will make the jump from the resetting of the calendar to it must mean that the major cataclysms are coming in a very slick way, usually not dwelling on this important transition. Those that do mention it usually cite one of the following reasons to tie it together. Number 1, that a Mayan ball game was actually symbolism that told us about galactic alignment, and number 2, that certain pictorials of the sacred tree also speak of galactic alignment. While I don't agree with the logic used to make these connections and think that they are far-fetched, and in some cases frivolous, for the sake of argument, I will say that the Mayans did for whatever reason choose to end their calendar on this 2012 solstice because of the visual effect of the sun rising in galactic center on that date, and that they fully knew of this effect. But even then, this would only be of local, religious, or mathematical significance. That is to say, if the Mayans believed it was a symbol of rebirth when the sun appeared in the Milky Way galaxy, it would be their prerogative. But it wouldn't have any galactic importance. There is also this idea that the Mayans were able to miraculously determine these events, but it should be noted that Western society discovered the precession of the equinoxes at least 100 years before the first Mayan calendar was ever made, so it wasn't exactly a new concept. The calculations to determine these events are not magical, but a matter of mathematics and astronomical observations. The Mayan culture stayed stable for centuries, so it's entirely possible for an astronomer to plot the position of some stars at midnight at the equinox, and his grandson to plot the same stars 72 years later, and realize that the stars had all shifted 1 degree in that time. Multiply by 360, and you get the precession cycle of 26,000 years. Almost certainly this is how they did it, because that's all it takes. So, were the Mayans predicting the end of the world? Definitely not. In fact, the entire reason, as far as I can tell, for this hype is that the Mayans restart their calendar, much like we do on December 31st. But they did it on a solstice, which they had the mathematical skill to do fairly easily. We are the ones responsible for this 2012 fever. we have put a lot of words in the Mayans' mouths. We have thrown pole shifts and Planet X and solar flares and everything else into the mix, all of which have no connection and not only weren't suggested by the Mayans, but it would be impossible to predict any of those things using any of the methods we are told that they use to make such predictions.
Joy comes from that bliss of connectedness. That's our God spirit. That's that side of ourselves that really feels it. And you can feel it deep inside you. It's this amazing, wonderful feeling. And you know it when you get it. You don't get it from money. You get it from connection.
Timing is everything. On September 29th, the United States stock market crashed, falling 777 points. Just in time for the fallout, a worldwide financial collapse, the movie Zeitgeist Addendum was released. The film, right on cue, explains the obvious, how a flawed financial system failed, and how it exploited the hard work, savings, and investments of all those that lost their money to this system. It simultaneously heaps the blame on free markets and religion, while calling for a global shift in consciousness. This new paradigm is, of course, an old paradigm. It's an open call for socialism. One need look no further than Karl Marx to see parallels between Zeitgeist Addendums linking a distaste for free markets and religion. This should set off some rather loud alarm bells in the midst of patriotic and freedom-loving Americans. Most of those that have been actively observing the global elite have likewise understood that a pre-planned financial crash has been in the works for some time. Nicolas Sarkozy, President of the European Union, says that he wants a new global economic system to rise out of the ashes of this crash, which, in his own words, is expressed as a New World Order. Zeitgeist Addendum seems to further the cause of this New World Order neo-socialist paradigm, with American politicians and representatives ignoring the masses and passing off the debt of banks onto the general public. One can see the seeds of a New World Socialism emerging right here in America. It's no coincidence that just as the New World Order begins implementing Marxist thought in so-called free countries, Zeitgeist Addendum shows up to incite the masses in a global call for Marxism. If one should prefer to save 2 hours and skip watching Zeitgeist Addendum, its proposals are clearly spelled out in a relatively unknown book entitled The Externalization of the Hierarchy, written by Alice Bailey in 1934. Bailey claimed to have channeled an ascended master known as the Tibetan, or dieforwhatubelive, who supposedly penned the book through her. Bailey was also the founder of the Theosophical Lucifer Trust, later changed to Lucius Trust. Please note that the solution to the faltering global economy offered by Zeitgeist Addendum is the Venus Project. Venus, also known as the Morning Star, is synonymous with the term Lucifer. Some highlights from Bailey's The Externalization of the Hierarchy include the following. The problem of money will have to be faced. The problem of the distribution of wealth, whether natural or human, will need careful handling, and a compromise reached between those nations which possess unlimited resources and those who have few or none. The problem of the varying forms of national government must be faced with courage and insight. The restoration, psychological, spiritual, and physical of mankind must constitute a primary responsibility. The sense of security must be put on a firm basis, the basis of a right relationship, and not the basis of force. Men must feel secure because they are seeking to develop international goodwill. Bailey's externalization of the hierarchy also includes specifics as to the nature of the New World Order, and the following are just some of the links between Bailey's work and Zeitgeist Addendum. The New World Order will recognize that the produce of the world, the natural resources of the planet and its riches, belong to no one nation, but should be shared by all. There will be no nations under the category haves and others under the opposite category. A fair and properly organized distribution of wheat, the oil, and the mineral wealth of the world will be developed, based upon the needs of each nation, upon its own internal resources, and the requirements of its people. All this will be worked out in relation to the whole. The New World Order will be founded on the recognition that all men are equal in origin and goal, but that all are at different stages of evolutionary development, that personal integrity, intelligence, vision, and experience